It's January 2023. Can you believe it?
That's crazy, man. Time
It is
flies.
crazy. It's Scott and Dane, and what do we call ourselves, Dane?
We call ourselves XR at Work,
We
Scott.
do. We call ourselves XR, not with our wives or children, but just in the XR community. So Dane, you and I have been talking about this for a while, probably too long, but over the holidays, I mean, who's got time to do this stuff? We got more important things to do than record podcast episodes. But we've been talking about the hot buzzword, the hot technology, ChatGPT, right? So everyone's talking about it, a lot of hype around it, a lot of speculation. Let's talk about a couple of things, and I know this is a big interest of yours, Dane,
Mhm.
and so I'm gonna just tee it up with, let's just talk a little bit about what is ChatGPT. Kind of, is it hype, or is there some meat on the bones? Is it going to amount to anything? And really, I think we should always bring it back around today to um, what do we care in XR, right? Because
Mhm.
there's got to be a tie into XR. We wouldn't be talking about it. So kick us off. Tell everyone, what is ChatGPT? Kind of, how did this come about? And kind of, what's the story there?
Yeah, and you're gonna get quite a monologue from me, Scott. Like I said, this is something I'm excited about. So, ChatGPT is essentially it's an AI chatbot, and when I was first reading about this, I was thinking about like, oh, Siri and Google Assistant, and we got plenty of chatbots. Like, why do we need another one? And for anybody who doesn't know, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is way more technical than I need to know, but if you're curious on kind of what that stands for, that's what it is. But the thing that's interesting about ChatGPT is that it understands context better than pretty much any other AI chatbot that I've interacted with in the past. And I think that that's not a trivial innovation in this space. And so, for instance, like
Yeah, what's that mean? How's that translate to kind of real example?
yeah, so and for anybody who wants to try it, you can actually use the tool for free and create an account. And I think it's on the OpenAI website. So just type in OpenAI on Google, and you can create an account there. The So, for example, my first experience with ChatGPT was logging in, and obviously I work for Invista, and so I said, hey, write me a poem about Invista, and it was able in 3 seconds. It wrote me a poem about Invista, which again, not the most valuable application of the technology itself, but you know the creativity that comes along with that, I think is a really kind of interesting and scary piece of the technology. And so then you get into things where, if we want to talk about a pragmatic example of, I can have it write me an essay. So I can say, hey, I need to create a blog post about AR or NVR, and I need you to talk about, the HoloLens, and I need you to talk about remote assist, and I need you to use a friendly voice, and all these different parameters, and it'll spit out a blog post for you, in seconds. And while it may not all be kind of right off the top, what you would want to put into a blog post, it gives you a really good kind of format to get started with, where you can go and add additional information. So that's a very pragmatic, application of it. And I think it's something that we'll probably end up using too in various, posts
Mhm.
we end up making, in the future. But the big thing about it is the context. So, like with Siri, you kind of get a little bit of this. Like you can say, Siri, tell me a joke, and then it'll tell you a joke, and then you ask, like, okay, tell me another joke, right? And it understands the continuity of the conversation. But beyond that, you kind of miss out on a lot of the important context that you might have in like a real conversation with a human being. And so, for instance, you can say, chat gpt, so here's one that you might use in like your day-to-day life. You could say, create me a nutrition plan that's 2,000 calories and high in protein and cost effective, and it'll give you what those foods, are, or, you need to eat this for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you can say, okay, tell me the ingredients that go into these meals, and it'll list out the ingredients of what those meals are. And then you can say, okay, put that in a table, and it'll put it in a table, or you can say, put it in a grocery list, and it'll create a grocery list for you with exactly the quantity and what you need to buy in order to be able to put together that, that meal plan. And
So
like,
tactically, though, this is a web interface,
mhm.
right? And you type your questions, or can you speak your questions through the website?
Yeah, so right now, my understanding is that it's just a type interface. It's kind of like Google, right? You can
Mhm.
ask it questions and it gives you an answer. But I mean, in the future, they have APIs and stuff, and so in the future, you could imagine that you use your voice to ask it a question, or you say import this data from here and tell me information about it. Like another kind of pragmatic example that I've seen people do is they'll import the script from, or transcript from, like a meeting that they're having
Mhm.
with people, and then they say, give me the top 5 points from the meeting, and it summarizes all that text into, these are the go-dos, these are the things that are
Action
important.
items, yeah.
Yeah, and so like I think one thing to call out right now too is, we're talking about very concrete examples of applications of it, but part of what's cool and scary about it is that it can be used so dynamically for many different things. And so that's really the context and the continuity in conversation, I think, is
Mhm.
what's really important. um, one thing we should talk about too is like what, I keep saying, like, it's scary. Like, why is that scary?
Yeah, this always comes up, right? There's kind of seems to be two camps. There's the hell yeah, let's go, and there's the oh man, the robots are gonna take over the world and Skynet. And I mean, why do you say why do you use the term scary? How's that been coming up?
Yeah, well, so I'm usually in the camp of hell yeah, let's go, right? And
Yeah.
like, I consider myself to be like a technology enthusiast, and so I'm always looking for, what's the new thing, and how are people using it. And this is one of the first technologies in a long time where it's caught me by surprise how applicable and powerful that I feel
Mhm.
like it could be. One thing that does scare me though about ChatGPT is that you it's always confident in its answer, just whether or not it's right or wrong. And so
Yeah.
it can be confidently telling you the wrong answer, and it when you're in the kind of midst of the discussion, it feels like it's the right answer because it's confident in telling you
Mhm.
that thing. And so I think people need to be really careful, at this point in the way that they use ChatGPT, because if you just take it at kind of its first word, then in some cases you may end up with wrong information that you're operating on.
Now, I've heard, I've had these conversations with, actually my college age kids that I have, Dane, they're all into this. And we had these conversations, over the holidays. We've been talking about this. I've heard, of course, the big thing comes up with, oh, this is people are gonna be having Chat GPT write their papers for
Mhm,
school. Um, um, and it did come up about, Chat GPT allegedly, you tell me what you're hearing, but allegedly goes through like a plagiarism checker to make sure that that's not just taking verbatim large chunks of information and regurgitating them back out to you.
mhm.
Um, so that kind of speaks to your point about if Chat GPT is perhaps overly confident in its responses, right? How much, how trustworthy are the responses from ChatGPT, and can we, kind of where are we at with our confidence in the information we're getting from it at this point?
Yeah, well, so what you were talking about is we should run down that rabbit hole a little bit, because the thing that's crazy about this tool is that it writes its own content per what you prompt it to write. And so, for instance, if you ran it through a plagiarism, thing, it's not gonna, or like a checker, it's not gonna
Mhm.
find anything that's written that before, because it's a unique kind of thought, you know, from ChatGPT, every time that you generate it. And so I agree. I think this will be an interesting technology to wrestle with for professors and teachers and stuff,
Mhm.
because who knows kind of who wrote the content.
Yeah.
But I also think that this kind of speaks to what the future of this technology might be. And so a lot of people are worried. And so I read an article where they had, and this was actually a Google chatbot, but they trained
Mhm.
this Google chatbot on a bunch of medical information, and then they had people ask it, general kind of things that you would talk to your doctor about, and doctors graded an actual real life doctor's response, and then also the chatbot's response, and they were like within 0.3% of each other as far as
Mhm.
accuracy. And so like that's crazy, because then it's like, you know, if I'm a
It's crazy if you don't need 100% accuracy, like in
yeah,
surgery,
exactly.
right?
But I mean, also, it's crazy to think about, like, in the past when we've talked about automation, I think as a whole, a lot of people have said like, oh, the blue collar jobs are going to be consumed by AI and automation and all these things.
Mhm.
But really, this is tackling a lot of kind of white collar, knowledge worker
Yeah.
type of roles that traditionally we haven't thought of as being able to be automated at this point.
Yeah.
Now, so again, going down the rabbit hole, I think what the future of the technology looks like is that the power of people, or the white collar worker, is actually going to be able to, you need to have an expert to be able to understand if what ChatGPT is generating is actually good information,
Mhm.
or if it's way off. Like for instance, I know you did some kind of coding, back in your day with
Yeah.
HTML and web development and stuff. But like, let's say I I told you, like, Scott, I need you to write me a script in the R language. Like, you're going to be like, I don't know, right? And then you're going to go type it into ChatGPT. It'll generate a script for you. And from your perspective, like, that script's right, because you don't have any kind of context as to what a wrong, R script might look like.
Right.
But if you give that to an expert, they could look at it and go, ah, no,
Yeah.
this isn't what I'm asking for. And
Well,
so,
it's like when you go onto Google now, like Google Translate, and you try and do some
yeah, yeah.
translations in from English into Spanish. Your friend that speaks fluent Spanish is like, "Yeah, don't use that. Don't use that sentence. It sounds like it was made by Google." Right?
Yeah.
Same sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yep. Well, and
Yeah.
so I think what happens is it allows experts to be more prolific at what they do as far as generating content,
Mhm.
and their role shifts from a content generator for whatever their specialty is to being more of like a content moderator for AI, and making sure that the information that it's spreading broadly is the correct information.
Yeah.
And so you become more of a fact checker for the AI than you become,
Mhm.
competing with it from like a content or you know, a knowledge, perspective, if
Right.
you will.
It's an interesting take. Let me ask you this. I mean, we were talking a little bit about this, Dane. Microsoft has said that they're going to challenge Google by incorporating ChatGPT into their search engine. Now, most people don't even know that Microsoft has a search engine, because I don't think it has more than 3%, of the use percentages. But it's Bing, right? And so, might we get into, do you think Microsoft can maybe pull that off, where the first one to incorporate the best, chat AI functionality into their search engine could really, could Microsoft make a play for Google,
Mhm.
or is the Google going to continue to clean their clock? And how much is that dependent on the technology?
I
Because
think,
Microsoft owns it, right?
well,
Well,
they're an investor. Yeah,
yeah,
I believe
yeah,
the the thing. So I think yes and no. I think from a consumer perspective, Google's probably not got a whole lot to worry about,
yeah,
because like when you say you want to search something on the internet, you say I'm going to Google it, right? Like
right,
it's so ubiquitous that you're probably not going to break people. There's not enough margin in that to break people away from it. But like, imagine if Microsoft integrates it into the Microsoft suite, and Bing is just
yeah,
like the integration point, where, like, for instance, if I'm an operator in the field and I have a question about, what pressure, this valve should be at, given that it's a part of this system
Mhm.
and it has this metallurgy or whatever, instead of me having to go and search for an Excel document with a big table that gives me pressure, with the metallurgy and all the other things on it, I could just go to Bing and say, hey, here's my question. It would query everything and then respond to it because it's
Mhm.
been trained on the internal documentation of the company. That is hugely
Yeah.
powerful, right? And I think we haven't seen a good implementation of like it. How do you, so for instance, like how do you train ChatGPT on your internal data? And there's not, in my, from what I know, there's not a great way to do that right now. Like
Not yet. Yeah.
if a business wanted to let ChatGPT loose on their internal information, there's not a good way to do that at this point.
Mhm.
But I think that's what the future looks like. Is you
Yeah.
have effectively you have your data lake or whatever, and then you say, hey, ChatGPT, sit as an interactive layer on top of that, and I'm going
Mhm.
to ask you questions and you're going to query information from the data lake and serve that up to me
Yeah.
as insight. Like it's the whole like uh what is it, we have an abundance of data and lack of knowledge kind of thing. It's
Right.
like, and I
Yeah.
think every business struggles with this right now.
Sure.
We have
We do.
data
Yeah.
all over the place and more data than you could ever want, but we don't know what the data is telling us. And so I
Right.
think this knowledge layer is going to be very important from a business perspective, and getting access to that information for people who aren't computer science or data scientists.
Well, it starts to get interesting for me when we talk about Microsoft because I was a Microsoft developer, legacy ASP, ASP.NET, VB.NET for years, and I like Microsoft technology. It's just the path I went down years ago in my career. I use a lot of Microsoft now. I'm excited,
Mhm.
because I like to see anything that could help in the Microsoft ecosystem, where I'm putting Microsoft extended reality technologies, devices, and software into factories in my day
Mhm.
job. I got to believe that they're going to have a leg up. I'm going to get to put that to work sooner rather than later, right? I mean, it's I don't have I don't use Google Glass at work. I use HoloLens. So, I mean,
Right.
you think?
Well, so like imagine, take this to a practical use case for you. Like imagine that you could just hand over all of your procedures that are already written and you
Yeah.
say, hey, go and write me a bunch of HoloLens, guides, procedures, and then, generate those and tag me when you're done. Right.
Yeah.
And then you could go through and have whoever the person is responsible for that, make sure that
Yeah.
the procedures are inputted correctly and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
like the crazy thing, and we're not going to have time in this episode to get into it, but we've talked in the past about Dolly and some of these
Yeah.
text to graphic interfaces. Like you
Right.
can imagine a situation where it's like, generate me a procedure for doing this thing, and if it's standardized enough, or you've trained it on content that's similar enough, it could generate you step-by-step procedure and also pictures of what that would look like as you go through and you do it, which
Right.
is crazy, to think
Right.
about what that means. And I mean, that doesn't disrupt your job. That just makes you way more effective because instead of having to sit there and do it, you can scale it much easier.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, I I get that some people might feel like, because I think we probably agree on this point, Dane, is that I think some people will say, this is scary, this is going to take my job. But, when I talk to factory workers that work alongside robots, right? They're glad that the robots are there. It kept them from having to continue to move that product from a conveyor belt to a pallet 500 to 1,000 times a day and throw their back out. Right? They like the advancement. They move on to doing more um, expert level or more less commoditized tasks and activities. And I think the same set of kind of thing you're saying. I'm not worried about any of this taking my job as an XR practitioner. I feel like it's another set of tools, and it helps us to focus on the things that the technology cannot do at all or yet. And so we get to do more advanced things, right? I mean, I I would embrace that. I don't see that as being scary, but I can see how some people might.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think it will disrupt some jobs, right? So like for instance, like when the automobile came out, all of a sudden like horse stables have an issue, right? Because
Yeah,
there's not any more horses.
yeah,
But if you're somebody who creates, horseshoes and move into making bumpers, which maybe
yeah.
that's a similar skill set, then it's a huge opportunity for you
Right,
because
right,
there's lots of cars being made now. And so
right.
I don't think I don't think every like I wouldn't want to say like it doesn't disrupt anybody's job,
Yeah,
but I think it just changes it. And then I also think that it takes certain very important roles that we have and accelerates it 10x or whatever in a very short period of time because you're offloading
yeah,
the generalized stuff to something
yeah.
that is much faster and more available than a
Right.
person would be.
So our audience, XR at Work audience, these are XR practitioners. They're men and women who are responsible for putting emerging technologies into, like we talk about healthcare, automotive, oil and gas, additive manufacturing, different, ruggedized environments, industrial environments for guys like us and people like us that do what we do, Dane. How much should we be concerned or aware of, or shift and focus into things like Dolly 2 or OpenAI's ChatGPT or whatever's going to come next? Is it just kind of in the periphery now? Should we have a side interest in it, or do you feel like this is going to have a near term impact on the kind of execution of XR in our environments?
Well, so here's an example. I think like have you used like Tailspin for soft skills training? Um,
I've seen it. We don't use them at work, but I know what
okay,
you're talking about.
so there's soft skills training where it's like here's how to have a tough discussion with an employee.
Difficult
Yep,
conversation.
or,
Yeah,
yeah, let them go or something like that.
yeah,
The I think they're really interesting. I think I've talked before on different episodes about I had to fire a guy named Barry, right? And like I
yeah.
still think about Barry from
We
time to
know poor Barry. Yeah,
time. Yeah. And so I think there's clearly power in those applications because you build an emotional relationship with a an AI or whatever an avatar.
yeah,
But the problem with that situation is that you have to create a script every time. And so, you're constrained to only having a conversation about the things that you've written. And you generally, pick a response that's like, what's the best of these three responses to give
yeah,
Barry, in this situation. And that's how it grades you over time. You can imagine where like ChatGPT API is tied into that. And, people go in, they join and they say, hey, Barry, how are you today? And it gives you a real response like it would be a human being. And that chat AI would be trained on a selective subset of information that you
mm,
want to teach somebody, and they could have an open-ended conversation about that topic and be able to
mhm,
have an actual kind of engagement with something that feels very similar to having a conversation with your supervisor or something like that, but in kind of a VR format, which I think is crazy powerful, especially when it comes to scaling and quickly training people, like
yeah,
what we've talked about in the past too. And then from like a Dolly perspective, and I don't know that this is a thing yet, but I imagine it's coming. If you think about video is just a bunch of pictures very quickly shown to you in order. Like
right,
there's no reason why you couldn't auto generate video, or like even 3D models are just
yeah,
pictures with a bunch of different perspectives. That's what
right,
photogrammetry is.
right,
And so I think, I guess to long, short story long, right? The answer to your question is I don't think it's going to disrupt you tomorrow, but I think that it's definitely something that I would be watching, because in the future it may be that instead of having a bunch of industrial designers put together 3D scenes for you that you end up using for training in Unity, you
yeah,
just type in, you say, I want a room with blue walls and a red square in the middle and a forklift and whatever. type it in, it generates the scene, and then you can go and make those interactions happen however makes sense for you. So I think it's, again, like it's not gonna, you're not gonna lose your job tomorrow kind
Right.
of thing because the AI is gonna come in. But I do think that it'll make teams that are smaller way more effective because they're able to generate more content than they would
Yeah.
have if they did it themselves.
I certainly think, VR is the first thing that comes to mind. Virtual environments and scenarios. When I think about artificial intelligence, it's certainly my mind tends to go to those VR use cases first. But I mean, I think the sky's the limit, right? I mean, we're only starting to get into um, this concept, and certainly in this 30-minute episode of XR at Work, where we talk about it a little bit, but I think it's going to be something we're going to need to touch on over the course of time. It doesn't seem to be going away, and I'm not afraid of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one thing I'll say too is, by no means are Scott and I an expert in artificial intelligence or any of the stuff. It's this is research.
I'm an expert in nothing having to do with the word intelligence.
But so I mean, we've I've done a fair amount of research on it, and I've played with it and interacted with it and stuff. But if there's somebody in our community that would consider themselves an expert and would like to kind of give us a perspective on the idiosyncrasies or the small things that make a big difference in this space, we would love to have you on and would love to have a conversation, because again, I think this rabbit hole runs really deep, and if I'm not careful, I'll get out in left field talking about what does this mean for society as a whole.
Well, I think there's good stuff happening. I mean, certainly a severe rapid uptick. ChatGPT just came out November, which is like 2 months ago from where we're sitting here in January.
So this is crazy. So I think I'm going to get the numbers wrong, so just take them as kind of a rough estimate. But
we should ask ChatGPT if these numbers are correct or not. But
yeah,
go ahead.
It'd probably be able to tell me. But so I think it took Facebook like a year to get to 1 million users. ChatGPT went from zero public users to 1 million active users a day in like 3 or 5 days, something like that. That is insane growth.
Right.
And so like that's that. So here's another point is like, and I don't know the research behind this either, but like, let's say the average person has 100,000 conversations in their life, right? Like that's 100,000 data points that you use, and that's what makes you wiser over time and all these different things. Like ChatGPT is having 1 million conversations plus a day.
Yeah.
Like that amount of learning is an incredible growth rate. And so like, that's one of the things that's scary to me is like, what does that mean? Like, where do you, where does that put you in a year? When you're 10xing the average person on a daily basis, after a year, like that's
right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
More to come. We'll keep talking about it. Super interesting. I do want to talk about DALL-E, and I want to talk about photogrammetry. I know you and I both have a real interest in some of the stuff we're seeing out there.
Mhm.
With I know you sent me some models of objects that you've you put into 3D in your house and stuff. And there's a lot of neat things coming in emerging technology right now. I think XR only stands to benefit, and if we can take and translate that into something that benefits our deskless workers, in the factories, in the oil fields, in warehouses. I think it's going to be a good thing. I'm super excited about it. I think 2023 is going to be a good year. We're already starting off great.
Yeah, agreed. Well, yeah, I was going to say, speaking of 2023 being a good year, do you want to tell them some of the progress that we made on
Yeah, exactly. If you look at, before this episode, we did one a Merry Christmas episode, just kind of talk a little bit about thank you to all of our listeners and our community in 2022. We talked a little bit about what we're going to do in 2023. One of the things that we said we were going to do is we were going to start to put XR at Work out on different platforms. And I'm proud to announce that we just got all of our back episodes from XR at Work from 2022 onto Spotify. So if you consume podcasts on Spotify, maybe you're even listening to this or watching this on Spotify, thank you. We're here for you. We're going to continue to branch out this year. Neat stuff coming. looking at ways we can maybe even take and start to make some of this stuff more available for our where's my camera, for our users, right? Wait, right side up. So we're going to try and get some more merch out. We're going to get more content out, and start to do some in-person events. We've got a calendar of events we're going to be at. We're going to absolutely see everyone back at AES this year, talking to other events like AWE or some other ones out there, looking to get out and about and shake hands. And I know that I don't know if you even know this, right? But I'm gonna do a shout out to our friend Drew. We had an episode with Drew in 2022 where we talked about his work in XR. Drew sent me a picture this morning. It was a bathroom selfie, so I can't post it, but it's him at CES in Las Vegas, and he's wearing his XR at Work shirt at
Very
CES.
cool.
I'm like, right on, man. How many more can I send you? So
That's awesome.
the community's growing. There's excitement. We've met a ton of great people. I know that Dan and I, we have both been blessed by everyone's interactions and just pats on the back and their involvement. And I think, Dane, I think you bring up a great point that if anyone wants to come on, talk about ChatGPT or anything else that's of interest, we'd love to have some more thought leadership come on the show in 2023. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I'd agree. We've had a blast over the last year, getting to know other folks in different industries and within our own industries. And so we hope to keep that streak going, and hopefully we can learn a lot from each other.
Yeah.
We're also, expanding some of our practitioner calls and stuff.
Yeah.
Scott and I have started a monthly practitioner call. So if you're an XR practitioner at a business and you just want to join a group of friends where we can commiserate and celebrate each other's wins as well, reach out to us, and we'll be happy to add you.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great year. Dane, it's good to talk to you. And I look forward to doing our next episode soon.
Same here.
Thanks, buddy.
Yep. See ya.